everybody. Today we have Superman, the Man of Steel from Krypton to Metropolis book. It's a Fisher-Price library of story tapes and books, but I don't have the story tape. Oh, man. They have stuff like Wonder Woman, Batman, Batman, the Justice League of America, and Superman. This one is entitled From Krypton to Metropolis. After that, we also have Batman and Robin, the movie pop-up book from DC Comics. So let's check it out. I don't even know if I've done this before, but let's check it out anyway. Superman in From Krypton to Metropolis. Story by E. Nelson Birdwell. Illustrated by Ross R. Drew. Adrian Gonzalez, Mike DiCarlo, and Gene D'Anglio. Superman! Copyright 1982 DC Comics. Years ago, out in space, far beyond our own solar system, the giant planet of Krypton circled around a huge red sun, many times larger than Earth. This scientifically advanced world had existed for untold ages, for Kryptonians believed anything could threaten their peaceful lives. But deep within the core of Krypton, natural forces were at work which would soon doom the thriving planet. One man knew the fate that awaited Krypton. He was Jor-El, that world's greatest scientist and a member of the ruling science council. But knowing the truth was not enough. He still had to convince the unbelieving people of his home world. This was Jor-El's mission. And on that fateful morning, as he walked through the streets of the great city of Kryptonopolis, one thought rang through his mind. It was distant at first, but it soon grew louder and louder until the ground began to shudder. With a quaking that threw many citizens off their feet, the building swayed, and the streets seemed to groan as they cracked apart, then as swiftly as it had begun. The tremor passed. Jor-El looked around to see if any of the people had fallen and needed help. No one seemed badly hurt, but the condition of the once beautiful buildings was getting worse each time the tremor struck. Jor-El frowned and quickened his pace, a fierce glint of determination in his noble eyes. Moments later, Jor-El stood at the great council chamber, ready to address its members. Almost breathless from his haste, he still found the power to speak out in loud. Our only hope is to build a fleet of giant space arcs to carry us safely to another world. I have searched through my store church, and I found a planet called Earth. Its yellow sun and lesser gravity will give us all the powers beyond dimension. We could become a race of Superman. As Jor-El spoke of Krypton's doom, the members of the council grew angrier. Finally, the council leader would hear no more. He rose to his feet and shouted down at Jor-El, "We have heard enough of your nonsense. You disgrace your position on the council with your prophecies of doom. We have found no proof of your wild theory. Yours are simply the ravings of a madman." Satisfied with his rejection of Jor-El's theory, the council leader returned to his seat, now barely able to contain the anger. Jor-El made his final plea to the unhating council. "You will have your proof, but by then it will be too late. The planet itself will have exploded from beneath our very feet." With that, Jor-El turned and struck out the chamber, his face a mixture of frustration and sorrow. After a time, he turned his steps homeward to tell Laura, his wife, of his failures. To take that a handful of foolish men could condemn the whole planet to a fiery doom. While he spoke, she listened calmly. In her arms, their little son Kal-El cooed happily. "Why won't they listen to me?" he asked her. "Why, you've done your best to save them. Since they refuse to accept the truth, at least you can finish building your ship to take some of us to safety." At that instant, another shock hit the city, this one greater than any before. Jor-El's worst fears had come to pass. The end was approaching, and only a small model of his planned spaceship was ready to be launched. With the baby secretly strapped inside the ship, Jor-El pressed the ignition button that sent it hurtling into space. In a short time, our son will reach the planet Earth. There he will grow to be mightier than any other being. Let us hope he learns to use his powers wisely for the good of all. On Earth, our son will be a Superman! Even as Jor-El spoke, his warning to the people of Krypton was fulfilled. With an awesome roar, Krypton exploded, but safe within the space vessel, wrapped in blankets of blue, red, and yellow. The last son of Krypton could not hear the sounds. Little Kal-El was too young to realize his worth was no more. Time went by. The small ships passed into another solar system, one with a yellow sun, around which several planets revolved. The ship headed for the third planet, a world of blue oceans, green vegetations, and great banks of fleecy clouds. The spaceship and its superhuman cargo knifed down through the clouds toward a field outside a town called Smallville in the United States of America. USA, USA, USA. In Kansas. In the state of Kansas, too, by the way. Driving along a country road in their pickup truck, Jonathan and Martha Kent were enjoying a pleasant June day when a roaring sound overheard caught Mama Kit's attention. Looking up, she grasped as she saw a strange red and blue object coming down from the sky. Even as the farmer brought his truck to a screeching stop, the spaceship struck the ground, plowing deeply into the field before coming to a grinding halt. Timidly, the Kents decided to investigate. Leaving their truck, they slowly edged toward the deep gorge made by the rocket. They were amazed. The spacecraft was unharmed, but the canopy had sprung open and something inside had been thrown out. "Hey, baby!" little Kal-El said on the ground, smiling. Ma Kit guessed, "He's adorable! Look, he's lifting to his fingers." She was wrong. He was crushing rocks with his bare hands. Ma Kit picked up the child. "Oh, Jonathan, we've wanted a baby for so long. Can't we keep him?" "Not if anyone knew how we got him." "Why, Martha, that thing he was in could have come from another planet. From all we know, we'd better hide the rocket and take this abandoned youngster to the local orphanage. You can bet they won't be able to find his family. When they put him up for adoption, we'll be first in line." Several days later, director of the Smallville orphanage ushered the kids into his office. The director felt relieved and thought to himself, if they want to adopt that baby, it's okay with me. If I don't know better, I'd swear that child has some kind of strange powers. Well, these folks can worry about that now. Had he or the Kents looked out the window at the moment, they would have seen Kal-El in a swing, going all the way around the bar in a complete circle, not once, but many times, and that was not all. Only the toddlers knew their playmate had now lifted the little merry-go-round. They were riding and were twirling it about, giving them a truly super ride. Meanwhile, the orphanage director made his decision. "Mr. and Mrs. Kemp, your application seems in order. You understand we generally prefer younger adoptive parents. However, in your case, we were willing to make an exception. You have our approval." To himself, he added, "Anything that makes my job easier. I still can't understand why the doctor couldn't vaccinate him. He claims the needle broke." As the couple joyfully carried the new addition to their family from the orphanage, John said, "We'll name him after your family, Martha, the Clarks. Hear that, baby?" Ma Kit added, "From now on, your name is Clark Kent." Kal-El didn't quite understand, though. Already he was picking up some English words. Within a week, he'd be able to talk pretty well. He had a super brain. Super brain. As he looked back at the sign hanging over the orphanage gate, Clark accidentally turned on his heat vision. The invisible beams from his eyes cut through the chain that held up the sign. It fell on the director's head. "I knew it, that kid is a jinx," he muttered to himself. The Kent farm was nothing Clark had ever seen before. On Krypton, farming was done by robots, and his family had lived in the capital city. He loved the earth animals and the wide fields that gave him room to run and play. The towering buildings of topless, could never provide this kind of open space. But one day, as Pa Kent plowed his field, he was horrified to see Clark chase the ball right into the path of the powerful tractor. There was no time to stop. A moment later, Pa Kent jumped into his working tractor, which had been crushed by the impact with the boy's body. Clark seemed unaware of what had happened. His play suit was ripped, but he had not been scratched. Day by day, Clark showed his parents what an unusual child he was. Once, Pa Kent needed to bring the cows from the pasture, and Clark decided to help. He carried a full-grown cow above his head. Drat, I'm out of matches, Pa Kent said. Clark decided to use another power he had perfected, starting at their pipe. He set out infrared rays from his eyes. Within seconds, Pa Kent was smoking intently, his pipe lit by his son's heat vision. One afternoon, the farm hands didn't finish stacking the hay. Imitating them, Clark completed the job in a few minutes. At least half a day's work for 3 men, and Clark wasn't even out of breath. A flat tire. I'll have to jack up the rear of the truck. Pa Kent could go no further. Little Clark calmly lifted the back end of the pickup and held it with his astonishing father changed the tire. I should have had this cake in the oven an hour ago. It would be late for the hospital cake sale, Ma Kent sighed. Clark turned on his heat vision, and he grasped as he saw him bake the cake in moments, using only his eyes. The Kents had an old-fashioned wood-burning stove in the farmhouse. As winter approached, Pa Kent declared, I'll have to lay in a supply of firewood. Clark watched to see how it was doing. Didn't split enough wood in the last 3 months in a matter of minutes. Super Clark Kent. Fire! Jonathan's cry rang out through the house. Swiftly, Clark followed his father up to the attic, not even bothering with the ladder. Instead, he actually flew. The boy knew how to put out the fire. One puff of a super breath came from his lips, and blast of wind tore through the attic, instantly extinguishing the flames. Pa Kent was utterly speechless, not only because of his son's deed, but because of something else he noticed. The blanket that Clark was found in. Pa Kent tried to cut the blanket with scissors. He couldn't. He then tried to pierce them with a pitchfork. The blankets were indestructible. At last, Ma Kent said with relief, our super baby wears out play suits so fast I have a hard time keeping him dressed. But now I can make clothes that will last out of these blankets. Pa Kent smiled. How do you make anything out of a cloth you can't cut? Ma Kent had planned. She unraveled the blankets and knitted them into a wear-proof playsuit. Whenever the threads needed cutting, Clark did a job with his heat vision. Several years later, Ma Kent unraveled her son's playsuit, adding more threads from the blankets. She made an altogether different costume. The blue shirt and the red cape bore a distinctive S emblem that one day would be known by the world over. When the boy was 8 years old, the Kents sold the farm and moved into Smallville, where they opened a general store. By the time Clark started school, he had established a special image. He wore glasses, was known as a meek, mild boy who wasn't very good in sports. There was a reason for this. He had to be certain that no one would recognize him when he was ready to start his career as Superboy. Imagine the amazement of the people of Smallville when they saw the brightly clad boy flying over their town. At first, some wouldn't even believe their eyes. Others regarded the airborne line was suspicious, but soon they all learned to welcome the youthful figure patrolling the sky. And why not? Stopping crime and saving lives became part of the heroic boy's daily routine. There were some, however, who failed to cheer Superboy's appearance. They were criminals, and they came both to hate and fear the Boy of Steel. As one put it, at least you have a chance when you're fighting a cop. But how do you fight a kid with a hide so tough bullets bounce off it like it were made of rubber? One day a bridge collapsed at school. Bliss started across it. The vehicle began to plunge. To seemingly certain doom, Superboy zoomed in and called it. The people were awed, but to Superboy it was nothing. Thanks to his great strength, the bus seemed no heavier than a feather. But important as these facts were, no deed was too small for the boy of tomorrow. Rescuing a kitten caught in a tree was as much of a part of the day's work as capturing bank robbers. Sometimes Smallville did not offer enough emergencies to fill his free time. He flew east to the Atlantic Ocean to save a tugboat sinking in a wrecked headstone on the small vessel. The grateful crew waved his hats and cheered. Soon Superboy was honored by people of all of all many countries, who marveled at this youngster, who did the impossible, and who could not be harmed by anything. Well, there was one thing. When Krypton exploded, its fragments were turned into a glowing element called kryptonite. Its radioactive rays could weaken Superboy, and exposure to the kryptonite for too long at a time would kill him. One particular day, a kryptonite meteor fell to Earth. Near him, overcome by the green radiation, the boy of steel sank to the ground. It seemed that nothing could save him, and then the boy still looked to see Lex Luthor, who was new in town. Luthor pushed the meteor into the river, where he could no longer harm Superboy. He was aware that Lex Luthor had a reputation as a brilliant young scientist. Superboy could not know that Luthor, who had just saved his life, would soon become a bitter enemy. As soon as he regained his strength, Superboy spoke to Lex. You rescued me from certain death. What can I do to repay you? Not a thing except maybe be my friend. I'm your biggest fan. Someday I hope to do as much good with my scientific work as you here have with your powers. Superboy! But Lantern, he knew what to do. Suppose I help you get started on that right now. I'm going to build you a laboratory. Superboy moved so swiftly that it seemed to Lex there was a whole crew of boys in blue, collecting materials, building, and painting. In a short time, the modern laboratory was complete. It only needed chemicals for Lex to work with. Superboy gathered these rapidly from on and under the earth, and even from outer space. From that day on, while other boys played, Lex Luthor worked in his lab. Yet Lex did not consider it work because he enjoyed it so much. The most difficult task, which would have dismayed many famous scientists, were enthusiastically tackled by Lex. One quest in particular drove him on. I must find a way to protect Superboy from kryptonite. After many experiments, Lex determined that the first step in creating such a cure was to create a new life form. If life existed, it could be created. If it could be created, Lex could create it. He was that sure of himself, and at long last he succeeded. It was a mere lump of jelly-like substance, but it unmistakably moved with the spark of life. Lex swelled with pride at this. Success! I am the greatest scientist who ever lived. He was so overjoyed that he became careless. As he flung out his arms in excitement, he struck some chemicals in the equipment, knocking them to the floor. A fire started, and within moments the lab was a roaring furnace. Superboy was patrolling across the town when he smelled smoke. The next moment he was flying directly to the source. He was shocked to find where it had come from. As he landed, the boy still drew in a mighty breath, then let loose a powerful burst of carbon dioxide. The blast immediately extinguished the blazing inferno, as though it were a candle. In seconds, the last spark flickered out. Have I arrived in time? I hope Lex hasn't been harmed by the flames. Superboy examined the lab with his X-ray vision. A gasp escaped from his lips. Lex had not been burned, but strands of hair were falling from his head. Within moments, he would be completely bald. Luthor scowled. You knocked over my experiments with your super breath. My great discovery is destroyed. I can never duplicate it. You did this on purpose. I swear it isn't so. I blew out the fire to save your life. You know that my discovery would make me more famous than you. You know that my discovery would make you more famous than you, so you deliberately ruined it. From now on, we're enemies. I won't rest until the world has seen the last of Superboy. And so Lex Luthor turned from good works to a life of crime. The years passed, and when Clark graduated from high school, he set his sights toward the future. I perfected my powers. I'm a full-fledged superhero now. I'll be able to do more good in a large city. And so he boarded the bus for Metropolis to attend a university there. He majored in journalism because word of crime and disaster often reached the newspaper office first, making it a perfect place to learn where he'd be needed most. During the second of his 4 years in college, Superboy gained a new name. Now he was Superman. When he finished college, it was time to find a newspaper job. Which paper should he pick? He chose the Daily Planet. Editor Perry Wright liked the look of Clark Kent. He was rather meek and mild-mannered, yet Perry felt that this young man could make a first-class reporter. All right, Kent, you're hired. I'm a tough boss, and I demand that a reporter do his job and meet his deadlines. If you do that, we'll get along fine. Now let me introduce you to some people. You two walked into the Daily Planet busting newsroom. Clark, I'd like to meet you, our star reporter, Lois Lane. Clark sensed that this was something dramatic about this attractive young lady. But there was something more, a look of independence and determination that had undoubtedly helped her become a top reporter at a very young age. Clark was not unusually one to make snap judgments, but he knew at once that he liked Lois. She was a sexy mama. Barry White was soon congratulating Clark for a long string of sleeps. Only Clark came close to matching Lois in getting Superman stories. As Clark's reputation grew, the two reporters became friendly rivals. One morning, as Clark was about to leave on the summit, the building began to tremble. An earthquake. Clark turned from the elevator and quickly made his way to the storeroom. No one else was in there. Swiftly, he shed his suit, revealing the color across the metal. Superman! A moment later, the framed red and blue clad figure sprang through a window and flew out over the city. Below, he saw streets crackling so violently parked cars were disappearing into the crevices. One of the two small buildings were already in ruins, and many large ones were seriously damaged. People were milling about the confusion, searching for shelter before anyone was seriously hurt. The first task was to find out what caused the quake and stop it, and that was certainly a job for Superman. This looks like a job for Superman. Directing his amazing X-ray vision beneath the ground, Superman spotted the source of the problem. Something had turned the bedrock beneath the city into a swirling pool of molten lava, driven down with lightning speed. He crashed into the ground and drilled through the rock and soul. In seconds, he had reached the liquid stone. A blast of frigid arctic air streamed forth from the Man of Steel's lips. Within seconds, the lava cooled and hardened back to normal. The threat was ended. It was certainly been a strange disaster, but no stranger than the tornado, which struck the countryside near Metropolis the very next day. Even as the man of might flew toward it, he saw the rumbling twister rip into a barn, reducing the building to shreds. Building to splintered boards, which were thrown out in all directions. Possibility of a tornado occurring in this part of the country was remote, and during the season, it was considered impossible, but finding the kills would have to wait until the tornado itself was wiped out. Stopping the tornado was nothing new for Superman. He had done it many times before. He flew the funnel, then began flying against the twister howling wind. Faster and faster he flew, circling his incredible speed. Finally, the encounter wind had wiped up exactly matched that of the tornado. The two canceled each other out. The tornado soon broke up and vanished. In a car below, Lois Lane was photographing the whole thing for the Daily Bulletin. Superman could not mistake the voice, for he had heard it often through the years. Since that fateful day in Smallville, it was Lex Luthor, his arch enemy, turning the Man of Steel. Saw a projected image of Luthor's face. It came from a small device that hovered into the air. Another of Luthor's brilliant inventions, and as usual, it was used both for crime and for revenge against Superman. The voice went on. I caused the disasters that have struck Metropolis, and I will continue until your city is reduced to rubble. The airborne projector began to fly away, and Superman followed. Lois Lane was getting it all on film. This is front page material, she thought. So intent was the girl reporter that she failed to hear the clinking footsteps behind her. With a sudden swiftness, a metal hand clapped over her, while another hand imprisoned Lois's arms. She was able to break free or to call out to Superman for help. The Man of Tomorrow had already flown too far away to notice her predicament. Whew, man. I had to stop for a moment. Catch my breath. Flying over Metropolis Harbor the next day, Superman saw an incredible sight. An enormous iceberg towering to the skyscraper heights above the water. Even Superman was baffled by the appearance of an iceberg this far south. The boats and ships in the harbor were clearly in danger. Superman hurled towards the icy mountains, but was stopped short by the harsh voice. Wait, Superman, don't smash that iceberg until you hear me out. Luthor again. I was certain this had to be your work. The radio voice of the villain made his projected face seem to speak. Who else had the genius to do this, Superman? But I advise you not to try smashing the iceberg until you have carefully looked inside with your X-ray vision. Twin X-ray beams flashed down to the Man of Steel's eyes, shoving through the thick ice until they reached in a bubble. Inside, Lois Lane was sealed, imprisoned there in Lex Luthor. By Lex Luthor. The evil voice continued. Smash the iceberg and she will be crushed. Use your heat vision to melt it and she will drown. Superman turned angrily toward the mocking image. This time you've gone too far, Luthor. I swear I'll catch you. And when I do, so great was Superman's rage that he failed to realize how close the iceberg was drifting towards the great metropolis Narrow's bridge. Nor did he notice a flying figure approaching from behind. A man propelled through the air, rockets attached to his bizarre costume. It was none other than Lex Luthor, this time in person. The next instant, Luthor seized the Man of Steel. It seemed to be an act of sheer insanity. Surely no more Earthmen could hope to match Superman in hand-to-hand combat, but the green glow surrounding Luthor's costume, combined with the pain and weakness Superman's feeling, told the story. Luthor's costume was covered with kryptonite. Once Luthor had saved Superboy from it, now the evil scientist was determined to kill the grown Superman with kryptonite, gathering every bit of his warning strength for one last effort. Superman flung his attacker into the sky. Then, with the kryptonite at the safe distance, he turned and flew off to the opposite direction. Luthor gained as he saw the fleeing figure. You cannot escape me, Superman. I've already weakened you. Too much I can see. You can't fly at super speed, so I'll easily catch up with you and destroy you. Superman kept flying, and he turned his head to gaze intensely as he persuaded his enemy. Luthor stared at the face, hoping to see the fear that he felt, certain he had imprisoned in the Man of Steel's heart. Superman's eyes showed nothing of the kind. He was staring at Luthor's costume, and the expression of the Man of Steel looked face triumphant. Only then did he drown on Luthor that happened to him. Superman was looking back so he could train his heat vision on Luthor's costume and burn away all the kryptonite. Luthor's weapon was gone. But that was not all. With the deadly green mineral gone, Superman shifted his heat beams to the rockets, which flew Luthor through the air. They were melting, and without them, Luthor was already starting to fall. Panic gripped him as he looked below. Hitting the waters of the bay from such a great height would be dangerous enough, but looming directly under him, Luthor saw the broad metal span of the Metropolis Narrows Bridge. Lex Luthor, you know I'd never kill anyone, not even as man as evil as you. With scant inches to spare, the Man of Tomorrow caught the plundering from the criminal scientist. Luthor looked up at Superman. I was afraid you'd be too weak to get here in time. No such luck, Luthor. I was only flying so slowly so I could lure you after me and use my heat vision on you. Besides, if I let you hit the bridge, think of the traffic jam you might cause. I never did like your humor, Superman. Police cars happened to be on the bridge. The team of officers who manned it hurled to take charge of Superman's prisoner. They were only too happy to do this, since it would mean that they'd be arresting the famous Lex Luthor, number one on the FBI's most wanted list. Superman smiled at Luthor. These gentlemen will see to it that you get back to your cell in Metropolis Prison. I'd fly you there myself, but I have some unfinished business to do. As the police sped away, the voice of the evil mastermind cut through the wall of the sirens. We'll meet again, Superman! The menacing iceberg had almost reached the busy bridge. Another few moments and the mighty steel span would be struck and crushed. Its cables would snap like threads. The bridge would buckle and collapse into the river below. Superman knew he had to act quickly, and yet Lois was still in the iceberg. He destroyed it without harming her. He knew. He flew to the top of the mountain of ice and yelled. But this was no ordinary yell. The sound that burst from Superman's lips was a super shot, so incredibly loud. The people of the bridge clapped their hands over their ears. The sound echoed throughout Metropolis, but the main thrust of the sound wave was directed at the iceberg. It ripped through the glacier mass, shattered it from small fragments. Within the air bubble, Lois heard the shout and the rambling of the breaking fire. She saw the broken chunks start to fall toward her, even as the icy floor under her feet began to crack and gave way. It looked like the end of the courageous reporter, but Superman had not acted with out, first figuring out every angle. The instant the shout left his lips, he went into super speed motion, hurling to himself to a climbing iceberg. So swiftly he reached Lois before a single fragment of ice could strike her. Superman smiled proudly at the brave reporter in his arms. He could feel her shivering from her ordeal, but he marveled at her courage. Sorry it took me so long to get you out of the iceberg, Lois, but I had some pressing matters to attend to. No problem, Superman. A smile on Lois and thoroughly chatting teeth. Right now, your presence is positively warming. Superman flew toward the dock, where a crowd of cheering spectators had gathered. Lois dropped down to insist that he take her all the way to the Daily Planet offices. You can drop me off here. I can hardly wait to see Perry Roof's face when I come in with the scoop. A short time later, Lois reached the Daily Planet's center room. Perry Wright was standing in the doorway of his office. When she came in, Lois hurled towards him, gasping, Perry, have I got a story for you. I've been kidnapped by Luther, still an iceberg, and rescued by Superman, when he shattered the iceberg with his super voice. What, Lois has stunned? How could you possibly know that? Clark was here 20 minutes ago with the whole story. Perry answered, it's already gone to press, but we still want your first-hand account for the next edition. Lois turned to glare at Clark Kent. She didn't say a word, but she was thinking plenty. How could he have reached the planet ahead of me? I called a cab as soon as Superman left. Even if Clark did happen to be on the scene to get the story, how did he manage to get there 20 minutes ahead of me? Unless Superman picked him up and carried him here, or if Clark Kent actually was... No, that's absurd. Clark suspected what Lois was thinking and smiled knowingly. Superman! Here's some other books. Some cast in order of appearance of Superman books. Well, that almost took my whole 30 something minutes, so I guess the Batman and Robin will be on the next video. So remember, God is good, and God is the real Superman. Jesus, because he created the universe. God is good all the time God is good, and Jesus loves you, and Jesus is the real Superman. And everybody have a great, wonderful day, and keep on gaming, keep on collecting, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And coming up next will be Batman and Robin pop-up book from the movie. Later.